I sat at my desk, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of my office. The late afternoon sun struggled to penetrate the thick clouds outside, casting a dim light that mirrored my mood. I was thumbing through a stack of files, attempting to sort through the remnants of cases past, when I noticed a plain white envelope tucked under a paperweight. Curiosity piqued. I pulled it out and turned it over. There was no return address, only my name scrawled in an unfamiliar handwriting. My heart raced slightly, a mix of dread and intrigue welling up inside me. I tore it open, my fingers trembling slightly as I unfolded the crisp paper inside. The message was brief but chilling. "You think it's over, Jason? The truth about Carl will come out. It's not as forgotten as you believe." I felt a jolt of recognition at the name Carl, my former client, a man whose case had been a turning point in my career, and not for the better. The sting of that lost trial still haunted me. I had believed in his innocence, fought tooth and nail to defend him, only to see it all crumble in front of a jury swayed by whispers of deceit. Carl had been accused of a complex fraud scheme, and despite my best efforts, the jury found him guilty. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the letter pressing down on me more than the physical object itself. Memories flooded my mind. Those long nights spent poring over documents, the tense atmosphere in the courtroom, the look on Carl's face when the verdict was read. I could still hear the gasps of disbelief echoing in the chamber. Had I missed something crucial? Had I been too naive, too trusting? The questions gnawed at me, and I felt the familiar pull of guilt and doubt wrap around me like a noose. Suddenly, my phone rang, breaking me from my reverie. I picked it up, half expecting it to be another reminder of my busy schedule. Instead, it was Sarah, my former colleague. "Hey, Jason," she said, her voice a mix of warmth and caution. "I've been hearing some things about the Carl case. You might want to be careful." My heart raced. "What do you mean? What have you heard?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost picture her biting her lip, weighing her words. "There are rumors that the case might be reopened. Some new evidence has come to light or something. You know how it is, whispers in the legal community." I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the flood of emotions rising within me. What kind of evidence? Did someone come forward? "I don't know, Jason. I just heard it from a friend of a friend. But I wouldn't poke around too much. Could be dangerous." "Dangerous? For whom? For Carl. Or for you," she replied quietly. "You were one of the last people to really defend him. If this gets out, people might start looking at you differently." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "I need to know more, Sarah. If there's something going on, I can't just ignore it. Just be careful," she warned again, and before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief, a mix of anxiety and determination coursing through me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that this letter was more than just a warning. It was a challenge, a call to action. I had to find out who sent it and what they knew. As I left my office, the air outside felt thick with anticipation. The sun had finally set, and the streets were illuminated by the warm glow of streetlights. I made my way towards the old courthouse, the place where everything had changed for me. It loomed ahead, a structure steeped in memories, both good and bad. Walking through the entrance felt like stepping back in time, and I could almost hear the echoes of past arguments and the gavel striking down on the bench. I approached the clerk's office, hoping to sift through old case files, searching for anything that could give me clarity. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked, looking up from her desk. "I'm looking for information on the Carl case," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need access to the trial transcripts and any evidence that was presented." Her brow furrowed. "That's a sensitive case. You sure you want to dig it up again?" "Trust me, I have my reasons," I said, feeling a surge of frustration. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "All right, but you didn't hear this from me." As she retrieved the files, I felt the weight of my past pressing down on my shoulders. The memories of Carl's trial flooded back. The testimonies that had painted him as a criminal, the defense I had built crumbling under pressure, and the bitter taste of defeat. The clerk handed me a stack of papers, and I flipped through them, searching for any mention of discrepancies or overlooked evidence. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through me as I immersed myself in the details, hoping for some clue that would tie together the fragmented pieces of this puzzle. Hours passed, and the dim lights of the courthouse felt like they were closing in on me. Just as I was about to give in to exhaustion, a name jumped out at me from the transcripts. Mike, the ex-police officer who had initially investigated Carl's case. I remembered Mike well. He had been a steadfast ally during the trial, but the way he had been dismissed by the prosecution left a bitter taste in my mouth. Perhaps he had seen something I hadn't? I decided to track him down. I knew he had retired not long after the case, and after some digging, I found his old address tucked away in the files. The next day, I drove to the outskirts of town, where Mike's modest home sat surrounded by overgrown weeds and a faded picket fence. I knocked on the door, my heart racing as I waited. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Mike, his face lined with age and a hint of weariness in his eyes. "Jason, is that you?" "Mike, it's good to see you," I said, forcing a smile, though my stomach churned with anxiety. "I need to talk to you about Carl." His expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "I thought we were done with that chapter. What more is there to say?" "Someone sent me a letter, hinting that there's more to the story. I was hoping you could shed some light on it," I replied, stepping inside when he motioned for me to enter. We settled into his living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I've always believed there was something off about that case," Mike said, his voice low. "There were too many loose ends, too many people who stood to gain from Carl's downfall." "What do you mean? Was there someone else involved?" He leaned back, studying me carefully. "There was a partner, you know. Carl was involved with someone who was never brought to light during the trial. They might have been the real mastermind behind the fraud." "Do you know who it was?" Mike shook his head, frustration etched across his face. "I had my suspicions, but I couldn't prove anything. The partner was always in the shadows, pulling the strings. It's likely they've been watching you since the trial." A chill ran down my spine. "Watching me? Why?" "Because you were the last one to defend him. If the truth comes out, they'll do anything to protect themselves," he warned. I could feel the pieces of the puzzle beginning to shift, but the picture was still hazy. "I need to talk to Sarah. She mentioned something about a partner, too." "Be careful, Jason. People don't like their secrets exposed, and you're digging into dangerous territory." As I left Mike's house, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. The letter had ignited a spark within me, a need to uncover the truth no matter the cost. I drove back to the office, my mind racing with thoughts of Carl, the partner, and the shadows lurking just out of sight. I knew that I was treading on thin ice, but the stakes were too high to turn back now. I had to confront the past, and hopefully, along the way, find the answers I so desperately sought. As I pulled into the parking lot, I caught sight of Sarah walking toward me, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Jason, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her brows furrowing. "You could say that. Can we talk?" "Sure." We found a secluded spot in the parking lot, and I shared everything that had happened. The letter, my conversation with Mike, and my growing unease. "Jason, this is serious," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're not just dealing with a closed case. You're stirring up a lot of emotions and fears. I need to know the truth, Sarah. If there's a partner out there, if someone is still pulling strings, I can't just walk away from this." She hesitated, glancing around as if the shadows themselves were listening. "I might know something, but it's not safe. Please," I urged. "I can't do this alone. If there's a chance to clear Carl's name, to expose whoever is behind this, I need." As I sat at my desk, the weight of the letter in my hand felt heavier than the paper it was printed on. My heart raced as I unfolded the crisp sheet, the ink smudging slightly under the pressure of my fingers. The words seemed to leap off the page, dragging me back to a time I thought I had left behind. The details of the fraud involving my former client, Carl, felt like ghosts emerging from the shadows of my past, whispering accusations I wasn't ready to face. I read the letter thrice, my mind flooded with memories of the trial that had obliterated my career. The evidence had seemed solid at the time, but the verdict had left me questioning everything I had believed about justice and truth. How could it have gone so wrong? I muttered to myself, the words escaping my lips as if they were a mantra. I could still hear the gavel striking, the murmurs of the jury, the disappointed faces of Carl's family. And now, this anonymous letter not only dredged up the pain but also suggested that the case might not be closed after all. With a heavy sigh, I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath my weight. The sun was setting outside my office window, casting long shadows that seemed to echo my turmoil. I glanced at the framed pictures on my desk, images of happier times, of victories I had fought hard for. But now, all I saw was a tainted reflection of who I used to be. As I left my office, my thoughts spiraled deeper into the abyss of doubt. I needed answers, but where to start? That's when I bumped into Sarah, my former colleague, in the hallway. She looked startled to see me, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to concern. "Jason," she said, her voice low, "I heard something about the Carl case." "Yeah, I just got a letter," I replied, my heart racing again. "Do you know anything about it?" She hesitated, glancing around as if the walls might have ears. "Rumors are flying that they're reopening the case, but I can't talk about it here." A pang of frustration shot through me. "Sarah, I need to know. This isn't just a rumor. This is my life, my career. What do you know?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from mine. I can't get involved. You should let it go, Jason. Some things are better left in the past." "Better left in the past?" I echoed, incredulous. "You know as well as I do that the truth matters. If there's something going on, I can't just ignore it." "Please," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just be careful. There are things you don't understand." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me with a sense of unease that settled deep in my gut. I watched her disappear around the corner, frustration boiling within me. I had to find out what was happening, and I had to do it quickly. The next day, I drove to the old property where the crime had taken place. The journey felt surreal, as if I were heading back in time. The abandoned building loomed ahead, shrouded in weeds and neglect, a haunting reminder of the past. As I stepped out of my car, I was hit by a wave of nostalgia mixed with dread. This was where it all went down, the place that had turned my life upside down. Walking through the creaking door, I felt the chill of the air wrap around me. Dust floated in the shafts of light filtering through broken windows. Each step I took stirred up memories and secrets buried in the floorboards. I wandered through the rooms, my mind racing with thoughts of Carl and the betrayal that had unfolded here. I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the wall of what used to be Carl's office. My heart raced as I pried it open, revealing an old box filled with papers. Inside, I found photographs of Carl with various individuals, some of whom I recognized from the trial, a tangled web of connections I had never fully understood. I flipped through the documents and found a list of names. Each one was a witness. Each one had a story. As I sifted through the papers, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, adrenaline surging through me. It was Mike, an ex-cop who had worked on the case years ago. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a knowing look on his face. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, stepping into the room. "You're digging up old bones, aren't you?" "Mike," I replied, my voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I received a letter about the case. I need to know what you found out back then." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "You really want to go down this rabbit hole again? The case was a mess, Jason. There were too many players, too many lies. I have to know the truth. I can't let this go," I insisted, feeling the urgency in my chest. "What do you remember about Carl's partner?" Mike's gaze hardened. Carl had a partner, but no one wanted to talk about him. He was slippery, always in the shadows. I think he was involved in something much bigger than just fraud. "Do you know his name?" I pressed, desperate for a lead. "Yeah, but he's not someone you want to mess with. They say he's still out there, and he doesn't take kindly to nosy lawyers. Ignoring the warning bells ringing in my head, I pressed on. I need to find him. If he holds the key to this whole thing, I can't just walk away. Mike studied me for a moment, then shook his head. You're playing with fire, Jason. This isn't just about your career anymore. You could end up in over your head. Then tell me what you know. Please, I almost begged. He hesitated, then pulled out a small notebook from his pocket. I've kept some notes, just in case. But if you find this partner, you need to be careful. He won't hesitate to protect himself. I took the notebook from him, my heart racing with the thrill of discovery. Thank you, Mike. This could change everything. As I flipped through the pages, one entry caught my attention. A series of numbers and symbols that seemed to reference a game. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the connection. What kind of game was Carl playing, and how did it tie into the fraud? Be careful, Jason, Mike warned again, his voice serious. You're digging into something that could get you hurt. I nodded, but my resolve only strengthened. I had come too far to back down now. As I stepped outside, the weight of the notebook felt reassuring in my pocket. I was closer to the truth, but I could sense the danger lurking just beneath the surface. The investigation had only just begun, and I was ready to confront whatever awaited me. The fluorescent lights in my office flickered as I sat at my desk, the letter lying before me like a dark omen. The unmistakable weight of the past pressed down on my chest. Each word I read felt like a taut string ready to snap. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the lines of ink that revealed details about a crime I had hoped was buried forever. A fraud involving my former client, Carl. I had thought I could move on, but it seemed the ghosts of my past were unwilling to let me rest. As I read on, memories flooded my mind, vivid flashes of the courtroom, the sharp tang of anxiety in the air, and the bitter taste of defeat when the verdict was read. I could see the faces of the jurors, their expressions a mix of confusion and pity. I had believed in Carl's innocence. I had staked my reputation on it. But the truth was a fickle friend, and I had learned that the hard way. My ethics, my integrity as an attorney, had been called into question, and now this letter threatened to dredge it all up again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The letter hinted at a re-examination of the case. Who had sent it? Was it a warning or an invitation? I could feel the pressure rising in my throat, a tightness that made it hard to swallow. I had spent years trying to distance myself from that chapter of my life, seeking solace in the mundane routines of my daily existence. But here it was, the specter of Carl's case, haunting me once more. I pushed the letter aside and stood up, needing air. As I stepped out into the hallway, the scent of stale coffee and old papers filled my nostrils. I walked toward the exit, lost in thought, when I nearly collided with Sarah, my former colleague. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, we both stood there, caught off guard. Jason, she said, her voice a mix of surprise and concern. I didn't expect to see you here. Sarah, I replied, forcing a casual tone. Just catching up on some old cases. She narrowed her eyes, a flicker of recognition passing over her face. You heard about the rumors, right? About the case being reopened. My stomach twisted at her words. I received a letter, I confessed, keeping my voice low. What do you know? She hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring we were alone. I heard it from some old contacts. There's chatter about new evidence surfacing. People are starting to talk again. Do you have any details? I pressed, my heart racing. I needed to know more to understand the scope of what was happening. But Sarah shook her head, a look of fear crossing her features. I can't, Jason. I don't want to get involved. You know how things can spiral out of control. Sarah, this is about Carl. This is about what happened back then. You have to tell me if you know something. She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world rested on them. I heard Carl had a partner, someone who was never brought to light during the trial. But I don't know who or how deep it goes. Why didn't you say anything back then? I asked, frustration boiling within me. I was scared, okay? She snapped, her voice rising. You think I wanted to be dragged into that mess? That trial was a nightmare. I didn't want to lose my job or my reputation. I stepped back, the reality of her fear hitting me like a punch. So you just let it go? I had to, and you should too, Jason. Let it go. It's not worth it. But how could I let it go? The truth was still out there, lurking beneath the surface, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow tied to the letter I had received. I glanced at Sarah, noting the fear etched on her face, the way her hands trembled slightly. You're scared, I murmured. What aren't you telling me? It's not just about Carl, she whispered, glancing around again. Some of the witnesses from the original trial, they've changed their stories. It's like someone is pulling the strings, manipulating everything. Who? I demanded, though deep down I feared the answer. I don't know, Jason, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But if you keep digging, you might just find yourself in a world of trouble. Promise me you'll think twice about this. I felt a surge of anger mixed with desperation. I can't just walk away. Not now. I need to find out what really happened. Then be careful, she warned, her eyes wide with concern. You're not the only one who's been affected by this. Just promise me you'll watch your back. As she turned to leave, I felt a mix of gratitude and frustration. Sarah's reluctance to divulge more was a stark reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. I was stepping back into a world filled with shadows, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might uncover. I watched her disappear down the hallway, her figure swallowed by the dim lighting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Back in my office, the letter stared at me, a silent accusation. I gritted my teeth, refusing to let fear dictate my actions. I had to piece together the fragments of the past, to find the truth buried beneath layers of deceit. The memory of Carl's case lingered in my mind, a puzzle waiting to be solved. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the contacts. Mike, the former police officer who had investigated the case, came to mind. He had seen the underbelly of that world, knew the players involved. Maybe he could shed some light on the matter. I took a deep breath and dialed his number, my heart racing with anticipation. Mike, I said when he answered. It's Jason. I need to talk to you about Carl's case. Jason, it's been a while, Mike replied, his voice gruff but friendly. What's going on? I received a letter about the case being reopened. I heard some unsettling things about new evidence and witnesses changing their stories. I thought you might have some insight. There was a pause on the other end. You're treading dangerous waters, Jason. You sure you want to dive back into this? I have to know the truth, Mike. Please, I need your help. All right? He said reluctantly. Meet me at the old diner on 5th. I'll tell you what I can, but this might get messy. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, I replied, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. I left my office, the weight of Sarah's warnings still fresh in my mind. The streets outside buzzed with life, but I felt detached, a spectator in a world that seemed to move too fast. I arrived at the diner, the familiar neon sign flickering in the twilight. As I stepped inside, the smell of coffee and greasy food enveloped me, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. Mike was already seated in a booth at the back, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. I slid into the seat across from him, feeling the tension in the air. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, his eyes narrowing. I might as well have, I replied, recounting the letter and Sarah's revelations. What do you know about the witnesses? Things are never as simple as they seem, Mike said, leaning forward. The case was riddled with inconsistencies. People were scared to speak out, and some were bought off to change their testimonies. There's a lot of dirty laundry in that case, Jason. Who was behind it? I pressed, urgency creeping into my voice. I can't say for sure, but I have my suspicions. You should be careful. There are still people who would do anything to keep the past buried. I nodded, absorbing his words. The deeper I dug, the more I risked exposing myself to danger. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to follow the threads of truth, no matter where they led. As I left the diner, The night air felt heavy with unspoken threats. I had a sense that I was being pulled into a web of deceit, where loyalties shifted like sand. But I was determined to unravel the truth, even if it meant facing the ghosts of my past and the very real dangers that lurked in the shadows. As I stood in the dimly lit room of the old conference hall, the atmosphere was thick with nostalgia and unspoken tension. It was a gathering of lawyers, a reunion of sorts, where old rivalries and friendships collided under the guise of camaraderie. I hadn't wanted to come, honestly. The last thing I needed was to be reminded of the past, especially with everything that had resurfaced in my life recently. But my colleagues insisted, and I found myself swept along with the tide. As I scanned the crowd, I spotted him, Lucas, my ex-partner, a man whose ambiguous nature always left me questioning his true intentions. He leaned against the bar, a drink in hand, wearing that same disarming smile that had once charmed our clients. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. Memories of our time together, both good and bad, flooded my mind. We had worked together on some high-profile cases, but it was our final case involving Carl that had left scars too deep to ignore. "Jason," Lucas called out, breaking me from my reverie. He pushed away from the bar and approached me, his expression unreadable. "I was wondering if you'd show up. It's been a while." "Yeah, just wanted to see some familiar faces," I replied, forcing a smile, my heart racing. "How's everything been?" "Busy as always. You know how it is," he said, raising his glass in a casual toast. "But I've heard some interesting things about you. Still digging into that old Carl case, are you?" His tone was light, but I could sense an underlying edge to his words. I took a breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm just trying to understand what really happened. It's important to me." Lucas's smile faded slightly, replaced by a serious look that sent chills down my spine. "You should be careful, Jason. Some things are better left buried. You don't want to stir up trouble. Trust me." "Is that a warning?" I asked, my voice steady but my insides churning. "Or just a friendly piece of advice? Call it what you want," he said, leaning in closer, lowering his voice. "But there are forces at play that you don't understand. People who don't take kindly to questions. You're poking a bear, and you might not like the consequences." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you know about it, Lucas? Are you involved in this somehow?" He chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. "I'm just an observer, Jason, an old friend looking out for you. You know how these things can spiral out of control." I narrowed my eyes, searching his face for any hint of truth. "You've always had a way of dancing around the truth, Lucas. If you know something, just say it." He straightened, the air between us thickening with tension. "I don't want to see you end up in a position you can't escape from. Just think carefully about your next steps. There are people who would prefer you not to dig any deeper." "Thanks for the concern," I replied, my irritation bubbling to the surface. "But I can handle this. I'm not going to just back down because you think it's dangerous." Lucas sighed, his demeanor shifting. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that. But stubbornness can lead to regret. Just promise me you'll be careful." I stepped back, wanting to create distance between us, but curiosity gnawed at me. What was Lucas hiding? What did he know that he wasn't telling me? "You've always had a knack for manipulation, Lucas. What's your angle here? Why are you warning me now?" He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm not trying to manipulate you, Jason. I'm trying to protect you. Just remember, not everyone is who they seem. Some of the people we used to work with, they are not as innocent as they appear." I shook my head, frustration mounting. "You're acting like you're some kind of sage. You were just as involved as I was. If you know something, now's the time to share it. Maybe it's better if you figure this out on your own," he said, an enigmatic smile creeping back onto his face. "But I can't help but wonder if you're ready to face the truth." I clenched my fists at my sides, feeling the weight of his words settle heavily on my shoulders. "I'm not afraid of the truth. I just want to know what happened." "Be careful what you wish for," he said, his voice low and serious. Sometimes the truth can be a dangerous thing. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was hiding something, that his motivations were not as clear-cut as he wanted me to believe. As he turned to walk away, I called after him, desperation creeping into my voice. "Lucas, if you know anything, please, just tell me." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "I wish I could, Jason, but some things are better left unsaid, for your own sake." I watched him disappear into the crowd, frustration boiling inside me. I couldn't trust him, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding back vital information. My instincts screamed that he was involved in something far more tangled than he let on. As the event wore on, I found myself lost in thought, replaying our conversation in my mind like a broken record. What did Lucas know? And why was he so keen on steering me away from the truth? I glanced around the room, catching snippets of conversations, laughter, and the clinking of glasses, but all I could focus on was the gnawing feeling of impending danger. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Emily's name on the screen. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, grateful for the moment of solitude. "Hey, babe," I answered, trying to keep my tone light. "Jason, where are you?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I was just trying to reach you. I'm at that lawyer's reunion," I said, glancing back toward the entrance, half expecting to see Lucas re-emerging from the shadows. "It's a bit overwhelming. Are you okay?" she pressed. "You sound off." "I'm fine," I lied, though I knew my voice betrayed me. "Just a lot on my mind." "Is it about the case?" she asked cautiously. "You've been so consumed with it lately. I'm worried about you. It's complicated, Em. I can't just walk away from it," I admitted, rubbing my temples in frustration. "Too much is at stake." "I get that, but you need to take care of yourself too. I don't want to lose you to this obsession," she said softly. I felt a pang of guilt at her words. "I know. I'm trying to find a balance, but it's hard. There's a lot I still don't understand. Just promise me you'll be careful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't shake this feeling that something bad is coming." "I promise," I replied, though I knew it was a promise I might struggle to keep. As I hung up, the weight of my decisions loomed over me, and I realized that Lucas's warning echoed in my mind. I was in deeper than I ever imagined, and the shadows of the past were starting to close in around me. The office felt suffocating as I sat at my desk, the weight of the letter pressing down on me like an anchor. The neat stack of files I had been organizing suddenly seemed trivial in comparison to the revelation I had just uncovered. My hands trembled slightly as I reread the letter, the words etching themselves into my mind. It was signed anonymously, but the details were unmistakably about Carl, my former client, a fraud case that had consumed my life years ago. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes as memories of the trial flooded my thoughts. The courtroom, the heated arguments, the faces of jurors who had looked at me with skepticism, and the final verdict that had shattered my confidence. I had believed I was doing the right thing, defending Carl against accusations that felt fabricated. But as I read the letter again, I began to question everything. Had I been naive, or worse, complicit in a crime I didn't fully understand? The pressure in my chest mounted as I recalled the whispers of doubt that had followed me since the case was closed. What if I had missed something crucial? What if Carl wasn't just a victim of circumstance, but a cunning manipulator who had played us all? My thoughts spiraled, and just as I was about to succumb to a wave of anxiety, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Jason." It was Sarah, my former colleague, and I could see the concern etched on her face. She stepped into my office, her brow furrowed. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the turmoil swirling inside me. "I received a letter about the Carl case," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Her expression shifted, and I could tell she knew the gravity of what I was saying. "I've heard rumors," she said cautiously, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "They say the case might be reopened, but I don't want to get involved, Jason. It's dangerous." Dangerous, I echoed, a knot forming in my stomach. What do you mean? I can't say much more, she replied, her gaze darting to the door. Just be careful. There are people who don't want the truth to come out. As she spoke, I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I can't just ignore this, Sarah. If there's a chance to right a wrong, I have to pursue it. She sighed, her eyes filled with concern. You're walking a fine line, Jason. Just remember, some truths are better left buried. With that, she turned and left, leaving me alone with the weight of her warning. Determined to confront the shadows of my past, I decided to visit the old property where the fraud had taken place. As I drove, the familiar streets seemed to whisper secrets I had long since buried. The abandoned house loomed before me, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Stepping out of my car, I hesitated, feeling the chill of unease wrap around me like a shroud. The air was thick with memories as I walked up to the front door, which creaked ominously as I pushed it open. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and I felt a twinge of nostalgia mixed with dread. This was where everything had unraveled. As I explored the rooms, I stumbled upon a stack of old boxes in the corner of what had once been the living room. My heart raced as I rifled through them, hoping to find something, anything, that might shed light on the situation. And then I found it. A weathered diary, its pages yellowed with age. I opened it cautiously, the handwriting barely legible, but the words sent a chill down my spine. Carl had written about his fears, detailing encounters with shadowy figures and references to a game that felt unsettling. The entries hinted at layers of deception, revealing that Carl was not the innocent man I once believed him to be. Suddenly, I was jolted from my thoughts by the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Mike, an ex-police officer who had been involved in the original investigation. "Jason," he said, his voice gruff, "what are you doing here?" "I came to look into the Carl case," I replied, my heart racing. "I found this diary and—" "Put that down," Mike interrupted, stepping closer. "You don't know what you're getting into. That case was messy, and it's not worth reopening old wounds." "I need to know the truth," I insisted, feeling the weight of my convictions. If Carl was involved in something more sinister, I can't just let it go. Mike's expression softened slightly, but he still seemed wary. "Listen, I've been digging into this for years. There are things you don't understand, things that could put you in danger." "Danger? I've already been threatened," I confessed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I received an anonymous call last night. They hinted at secrets from my past, things I don't want exposed." His brow furrowed, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to be careful, Jason. The people involved in this case are not just looking to hide the past. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests." As we spoke, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. My investigation was pulling me deeper into a labyrinth of deceit, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. "What should I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "First, you need to stay off the radar," Mike advised. "Don't discuss this with anyone, and definitely don't involve Sarah. I know she's your friend, but she's not safe either." "Why do you say that?" I questioned, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Because the last thing they want is for anyone to start digging. You're already a target just by being curious," Mike replied, his voice low and serious. "I'll help you, but you need to keep your head down." I nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation settle over me like a dark cloud. As Mike left, I was left alone with the diary, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I needed to figure out what was really going on, but I also needed to protect the people I cared about. When I returned home that evening, Emily was waiting for me, her brows knitted in concern. "Jason, you've been gone all day. What's happening? You look exhausted." I let out a long sigh, the tension of the day crashing down on me. "It's complicated," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "I found a diary belonging to Carl, and it's not good. There are things in there that could change everything." "Change everything how?" she pressed, her eyes widening with worry. There's a lot I can't share right now. I'm trying to figure things out, but the deeper I dig, the more dangerous it becomes, I replied, feeling the weight of my secrets. She stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm. You need to talk to me, Jason. I don't want to feel like I'm in the dark. This is affecting us. I looked into her eyes, and for a moment, I felt the warmth of her concern. I know. I'm just trying to protect you. There are people who won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Her expression hardened slightly. I can handle the truth, Jason. But if you keep shutting me out, I won't be able to help you. I took a deep breath, torn between my desire to shield her and the need for her support. I'll try to share more, I promise. But you have to understand, I can't let you get hurt because of my choices. The tension between us hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of unspoken words lingering. But just as the moment began to settle, my phone rang, piercing the silence like a gunshot. I glanced at the screen and felt my heart drop. It was an unknown number. Who is it? Emily asked, her concern palpable. I don't know, I replied, hesitating before answering. Hello. There was silence on the other end before a voice, low and distorted, broke through the line. Jason, you need to stop digging. You're playing a dangerous game, and you won't like how it ends. My pulse quickened, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Who is this? I demanded, but the line went dead, leaving only the sound of my own breathing echoing in my ears. As I hung up the phone, I turned to Emily, who looked ashen. That was unsettling. I admitted, my mind racing. They know what I'm doing. Her eyes widened, and she stepped back, fear creeping into her voice. Jason, we need to take this seriously. You can't keep pushing forward like this. I can't just walk away, Emily, I replied, feeling the weight of my resolve. Not now. I need to get to the bottom of this. But at what cost? She shot back, her voice rising. You're risking everything, your career, our relationship. It's not worth it. I felt a pang of guilt as I watched her frustration boil over. I'm trying to find the truth. I can't let this go, especially now that I know there's more at stake. Emily crossed her arms tightly, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. You need to choose, Jason. Either you let the dim light of my office flickered as I sat hunched over my computer, replaying the events of the past few weeks. The weight of the anonymous letter still hung heavy in my mind, a persistent reminder of the unresolved shadows that lurked in the corners of my professional life. The fraud case involving Carl had long been buried, or so I thought. Now, it was clawing its way back into my consciousness, taunting me with its unfinished business. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. My gaze drifted to the window, where the city hummed with life outside. I should have been concentrating on my current cases, but the nagging feeling that I was being watched consumed me. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, that instinctive awareness that someone was out there, pulling strings and orchestrating events that I could barely comprehend. My phone buzzed on the desk, breaking my train of thought. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Hesitantly, I picked it up and answered. Hello, Jason. A gravelly voice rasped on the other end. You need to stop digging into that case. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Who is this? I demanded, my heart racing. Just someone looking out for your best interest. The voice continued, cold and unyielding. You don't know what you're getting into. Leave it alone. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, bewildered. My gut instinct screamed that this was somehow connected to the letter, to Carl, and to the reawakening of a dark chapter in my life. The thought sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to uncover the truth behind that call, and fast. I decided to trace the number. That felt like my only option, considering the threat in the voice. I fired up my laptop and began typing, searching for any leads. The number belonged to an old emergency hotline, one that had been shut down years ago. It was a dead end, but my instincts told me otherwise. Someone was still using it for a purpose, and I was determined to find out why. After a few more dead ends, I stumbled upon a lead. A recording. I could barely believe my luck, but I wasn't about to question it. I found a way to access the old recordings from the hotline, and my heart raced as I listened to the static crackle to life. The first few moments were filled with a disorienting silence, but then I heard voices. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized one of them. Carl's voice, unmistakable. The other was a low, unfamiliar tone that sent chills down my spine. "We have to make sure he takes the fall," Carl said, his words dripping with malice. "Are you sure this is going to work? He's smart and he'll dig." The unknown voice replied, "Let him die. The more he uncovers, the more tangled he'll get. He thinks he's so clever. We just need to plant the evidence, and he'll be done for." Carl's laughter echoed through the recording, a sound so sinister it made my skin crawl. I stopped the recording, my heart pounding. They were talking about me. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was being set up. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but I still needed to know who was behind this. Who was the unknown voice? What exactly were they planning? I glanced at the clock. It was late, and the office was eerily quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. If they knew I was investigating, they might come after me, or worse, after Emily. I needed to protect her, but I also needed answers. I decided to pay a visit to Mike, the ex-cop who had once investigated the case. I grabbed my coat and headed out, the city lights flickering as I walked the familiar streets. Each step felt heavier. Each shadow seemed to loom larger than life. My mind raced with possibilities. What if Lucas was involved? He had always been someone I found hard to trust, lurking in the background like a ghost. When I reached Mike's place, I knocked on the door. The sound echoed in the stillness of the night. After a moment, I heard shuffling inside, and the door creaked open. Mike stood there, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Jason, what are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. "I need to talk to you about the Carl case," I said, urgency lacing my voice. Mike's brow furrowed as he closed the door behind me. "I thought you were done with that." "I thought I was too, but I've received some disturbing information. I think I'm being targeted, Mike. I need to know if you have any leads on what really happened." He leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "You're digging into a grave that should have been left alone. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "I found a recording. Carl was plotting something that involves me. He's not just a victim in this. He's orchestrating a plan to take me down." Mike's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure it's him?" "Yes." I recognized his voice. He was talking about planting evidence to frame me. I can't believe I missed this before. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration boiling over. "I need your help. I need to know everything you found during your investigation." He sighed, running a hand over his stubbled chin. "All right, but this isn't going to be easy. There are things I uncovered that were never made public. It was all swept under the rug. Anything you have could help?" I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. Mike hesitated, then nodded. "Let me grab some files. But you need to be careful, Jason. If Carl is involved, he won't stop at anything." As Mike went to fetch the files, my mind raced. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, that I was being pulled into a game I didn't fully understand. I had to stay one step ahead, not just for myself, but for Emily too. When Mike returned, he laid the files on the table, a thick stack of papers that smelled of stale coffee and old secrets. "Here's what I found. It's a mix of witness statements, police reports, and some of my own notes." I flipped through the papers, scanning for anything that stood out. "What about the witnesses? Did anyone mention Carl's partner?" "Not directly, but there were whispers," Mike said, leaning closer. "Some of them claimed they were approached by someone offering them money to change their testimonies. It was all very hush-hush, but I suspect Carl had a lot more help than anyone realized." I felt a chill run down my spine. If he had a partner, that means he had someone to cover his tracks. We're dealing with more than just a simple fraud case here. Mike nodded gravely. "Exactly. And if they're still out there, They're not going to take kindly to you poking around. Then I need to find out who it is before they get to me, I replied, determination flaring within me. I can't let them succeed. As I left Mike's apartment, the weight of the files pressed heavily in my bag. I couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. I needed to act quickly, but I also had to be smart about it. The last thing I wanted was to put Emily in harm's way. As I walked back to my car, the city felt different. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the streetlights flickered ominously. I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the darkness. I made it to my car, heart pounding, and drove home with a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. When I arrived, the apartment was dark, and a wave of unease washed over me. Emily should have been home by now. I fumbled for my keys, hurriedly unlocking the door and stepping inside. "Emily?" I called, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. I moved through the living room, checking every corner of the apartment. My heart raced as I flipped on the lights, illuminating the space. Everything seemed in order, but the silence was deafening. I was about to reach for my phone when it buzzed in my pocket, startling me. It was a text from Emily. "I'm running late, stuck in traffic. Be home soon." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by the gnawing anxiety that had become my constant companion. I knew I couldn't let my guard down, not for a second. I needed to prepare for whatever was coming my way, and I needed to protect Emily. I set up a makeshift plan, going through the files Mike had given me, searching for any connections that might lead me to Carl's partner or whoever was behind the scheme. The clock ticked away, each sound amplifying the tension in the room. As I worked through the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The creeping sensation settled deep within me, a reminder that the past was far from over. I needed to stay vigilant, and I needed to uncover the truth, if not for myself, then for Emily. The stakes were higher than ever, and I was running out of time. I stood outside the dimly lit bar, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with tension, and the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the closed door. I took a deep breath and pushed the heavy door open, stepping into the smoky haze. The familiar faces of my former colleagues greeted me, but my focus was solely on Lucas. He was there, leaning casually against the bar, his ever-present smirk plastered across his face. As I made my way through the crowd, I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. Memories of our time as partners flooded my mind, the late nights, the victories, and the betrayals. Lucas had always been enigmatic, a man with a smile that could charm anyone. But behind that facade lay secrets I was determined to uncover. "Jason," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the bar. "Come join me. It's been too long since we've had a drink." I approached him, my expression guarded. "Lucas, I need to talk to you. It's important." He raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Important? Sounds serious. What's on your mind?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I know you're involved in this mess regarding Carl's case. I have questions, and I need answers." Lucas chuckled, but there was an edge to it that made me uneasy. "You've always been too serious for your own good, Jason. You're chasing ghosts. Carl is dead and buried, and so should be that case." I narrowed my eyes, sensing the challenge in his tone. "You know more than you're letting on. I've been piecing together the fragments of that case, and your name keeps coming up. I need you to stop playing games." He straightened at my words, his demeanor shifting. "Games? You think this is a game? You don't understand the stakes here, do you?" "What stakes?" I pressed, my frustration boiling over. "You were supposed to be my partner. If you know something, you need to tell me." Lucas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You really want to know? Fine. But I warn you, Jason, the truth might be more than you can handle. Try me." I shot back, my resolve solidifying. I wasn't going to back down now. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, and glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "All right, but first let's get a drink. This is going to take a while." I nodded, and we ordered 2 whiskeys. As we settled into a corner booth, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The bar was busy, but my instincts told me that Lucas was more than just a former partner. He was a potential threat. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, my voice steady. "What do you know about Carl's partner? The claims about witnesses changing their testimonies? It all points back to you." Lucas took a slow sip of his drink, his expression unreadable. "You've been digging deeper than I thought. But let me make one thing clear. I didn't change any testimonies, and I didn't have a hand in Carl's games. He was a master manipulator." "Then why are you so defensive?" pressed. "You're acting like you have something to hide." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "I'm defensive because you're making accusations without proof. You're going down a dangerous path, Jason. I didn't get to where I am by playing nice." "Where you are?" I scoffed. "You mean in a bar, avoiding the truth? You think your status means anything when the truth comes out? You know what Carl was capable of. I won't let his shadow haunt me any longer." Lucas's eyes darkened. "You have no idea what you're getting into. Carl's death isn't the end. It's just the beginning. There are people who would do anything to protect their secrets." I leaned in, the tension between us palpable. "What are you saying? Are you threatening me?" "Not a threat, just a warning." His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You have to understand, Jason. Some things are better left buried." "Not for me." I shot back, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. "I'm not letting you or anyone else dictate what I can and cannot uncover." He sighed, his facade slipping momentarily. "You really think you're the hero in this story? You were part of it too, you know?" I straightened, anger flaring within me. "I made mistakes, yes, but I'm trying to rectify them. You, on the other hand, are still playing your little games, and I won't let you manipulate me." "Manipulate? You think you're the only one who's been played." Lucas's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "You were blind to the real game all along. It's not just about Carl. It's about power, influence, and survival." I shook my head, refusing to be intimidated. "You're deflecting. You know more about this than you're admitting. If Carl had a partner, who was it? And why did the witnesses change their stories?" Lucas hesitated, his gaze flickering to the bar's entrance. "You really want to know? Fine. But understand that once you dig deeper, there's no turning back. Then tell me." My voice was steady, filled with determination. He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's a network of people who would do anything to keep their past hidden. Carl wasn't just a fraud, he was a puppet master. And you, my friend, are in the crosshairs now." "Crosshairs?" I echoed, my heart racing. "What are you talking about?" "Think about it. You're digging up a case that was meant to stay buried. You've already made enemies, and if you continue, you'll find yourself in a position you can't escape from." His words were laced with a mix of warning and something darker. "I can handle it," I replied, though uncertainty crept into my voice. "I have to know the truth." "Do you?" Lucas challenged, leaning back again. "What if the truth is that you were never meant to find it? What if you were just a pawn in someone else's game?" I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. "Then I'll be the pawn who refuses to play by their rules. Stubborn as ever, I see." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Just remember, Jason, every move you make has consequences. You might think you're in control, but the moment you step into that ring, you're playing by someone else's rules." "Then I'll figure out those rules," I stated firmly. "I won't be manipulated again." Lucas studied me, his expression shifting to one of genuine concern mixed with something else. Fear, perhaps. "Jason, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to help you see the bigger picture. You're not alone in this, but you need to tread carefully." "Help? You've done nothing but deflect." I shot back, feeling the anger bubble up once more. "You're protecting yourself, not me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair again. "I'm trying to protect us both. Carl was a threat, and his partner is still out there. If they find out you're sniffing around, things could get ugly." "Ugly?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Is that why you're so eager to scare me off?" Because you're afraid of what I might uncover. I'm afraid of what you might lose, he replied, his tone more serious now. You think you're the only one who cares about the truth? There are people in this world who will kill to keep their secrets safe. The weight of his words settled heavily on my shoulders. You're not making sense, Lucas. Are you saying there's a real danger? I'm saying you need to think long and hard about your next steps, he insisted, his eyes boring into mine. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone you care about. I felt a chill run down my spine. Emily's face flashed in my mind. If you know something that could put her in danger, you need to tell me. I won't let anyone hurt her because of my choices. Lucas hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of regret cross his face. I can't protect you from everything, Jason, but I can help you if you let me. Help me? I scoffed. You've had your chance. If you have information, you need to share it now. Otherwise, I'm done playing this game with you. He leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. All right, but you need to promise me you'll be careful. There are forces at play that you aren't prepared for. I'll take my chances, I replied, my decision firm. But I won't walk away from this without getting answers. Lucas nodded, his expression serious. Fine, but remember, once you start digging, there's no going back. You might find more than you bargained for. Bring it on, I challenged, feeling a mix of adrenaline and fear surge through me. I was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, even if it meant facing the darkness that had haunted me since Carl's case first crossed my path. As we left the bar, the weight of the conversation hung heavy. The rain pattered softly against the window as I sat in my dimly lit living room, surrounded by the remnants of my chaotic investigation. Stacks of papers, photographs, and notes cluttered the coffee table. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of my obsession pressing down on me. I had been consumed by the case, driven by the need to uncover the truth behind Carl's fraud and the mysterious circumstances surrounding it. But as I rifled through the documents for the umpteenth time, I could hear Emily in the kitchen, her voice laced with frustration. Jason, can we talk? She called out, her tone a mix of concern and irritation. I looked up from my scattered notes, my heart sinking at the thought of another conversation about my fixation. I knew I needed to address our growing distance, but every time I opened my mouth, it felt like I was digging myself deeper into a hole. Yeah, just a minute, I replied, trying to sound casual as I shoved a few papers into a folder and tossed it aside. She entered the room, arms crossed, her brow furrowed. Emily had always been the steady force in my life, but lately, it felt like I was watching her slip away. You've been at this for hours, Jason. Are you even listening to me? I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck, and met her gaze. I know it looks bad, but I'm so close to figuring this out. I can feel it. Close? You've been saying that for weeks. This case is consuming you. It's like you're not even here anymore. Her voice softened slightly, but the hurt was evident in her eyes. Emily, I have to do this. This isn't just about me. It's about the truth. About what happened to Carl and how it all connects to... Connects to what? Your life? Your sanity? She interrupted, frustration boiling over. You're putting everything on the line, including us. I can't keep doing this. I need you to be present with me, not lost in your files and theories. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, she stepped back, her expression shifting. I got a letter, Jason. The words hit me like a jolt. What do you mean, a letter? Her eyes darted to the side, avoiding my gaze. I didn't want to tell you. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Who sent it? My heart raced as I felt a chill run down my spine. The pieces of the puzzle that had been scattered in my mind suddenly started to come together. I don't know. It was anonymous, just like the one you got. They threatened me, Jason. They warned me to stay away from you, to stop digging into this case. My stomach twisted as I absorbed her words. Threatened you? Emily, why didn't you tell me sooner? This is serious. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want to make you feel like you were putting me in danger. She looked down, shame creeping into her voice. But I can't ignore it anymore. They know about us, Jason. They want us to separate. I think they're trying to manipulate us. I stepped closer, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and fear. Manipulate us? Do you know who it is? No, I don't have any idea. But they know too much. They mention things, personal things. She paused, her voice trembling. Things that only someone close to us would know. A wave of anger surged within me. I wanted to scream, to lash out at whoever was behind this, but I focused on Emily's face instead. We have to figure this out together. We can't let whoever this is come between us. You're not alone in this. She took a deep breath, visibly steadied by my words. I want to help, Jason. I really do, but I'm scared. I thought about just walking away, letting you handle this on your own. But then I realized, I can't. I don't want to lose you. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. You're not going to lose me. We're in this together. If we're both being targeted, we need to find out who's behind it. We can't let fear control our lives. But how? We don't even know where to start, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I thought for a moment, my mind racing with possibilities. The letters, they might have something in common. If we can analyze them, maybe we can find a clue, a signature, something that leads us back to whoever is pulling the strings. Emily nodded, her eyes brightening with a hint of determination. Okay, let's do it. Let's start with the details. What exactly did the letter say? I guided her to the couch, where we could sit together and piece it all out. She took a deep breath, and I could see the resolve building in her posture. It said something about keeping my distance from you, about how I was being watched. It warned me that if I didn't comply, there would be consequences. Felt threatening. Did it mention anything about Carl or the investigation? I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. No, just that I should stop you from looking into your past. It felt like they were trying to scare me away from you, like they wanted to isolate us, she replied, her voice shaky. I felt a surge of frustration. Whoever sent you that letter knows how to get under our skin. They're trying to play with our emotions, trying to create fear between us. But why? Emily questioned. What do they gain from that? Maybe they want to keep us both from uncovering the truth, I suggested. If we're distracted by our own fears, we won't be able to focus on the investigation. They want us to be afraid of each other instead of uniting against them. Then we need to strengthen our bond, she said, her voice gaining strength. If they think they can scare us apart, they're wrong. Exactly, I affirmed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. We'll tackle this together. We'll find out who's behind these letters and expose them. As the evening wore on, we meticulously examined both letters side by side, searching for any commonalities. Each word was scrutinized, every punctuation mark analyzed. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we worked together, piecing together a puzzle that was far more complex than either of us had anticipated. After hours of sifting through the paper, I leaned back, exhausted but invigorated. We're making progress. We just need to stay focused and not let fear cloud our judgment. Emily looked at me, her eyes shining with determination. I believe in us, Jason. We can do this. I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. Together, we're stronger. We won't let anyone come between us. In that moment, as the storm raged outside, I felt an unbreakable bond forming between us. We were no longer just individuals lost in a web of deceit. We were partners, united against an unseen enemy. And as I held her hand tightly, I knew we would face whatever came next together, refusing to let fear dictate our lives. The air was thick with tension as Emily and I stood in our living room, the dim light casting shadows that danced against the walls. The weight of the recent revelations hung heavily between us. I had just learned that Emily had received an anonymous letter too, one that threatened our safety and urged her to distance herself from me. It felt as if a storm was brewing, and we were caught in the eye of it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice a mixture of frustration and fear. You could have come to me. We could have faced this together. Emily crossed her arms, her gaze fixed on the floor. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought it might pass. that maybe it was just a prank. A prank, I scoffed, running my fingers through my hair. This is not just some childish joke, Emily. Someone is playing games with our lives. They want to tear us apart. I know, she whispered, her voice trembling. But when I read that letter, I was terrified. They know things about us, Jason. Things that could ruin us. I stepped closer, trying to bridge the emotional distance between us. We can't let fear control us. We need to find out who's behind this. Together. She finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What if it's someone we know? What if it's someone close to us? The thought struck me like a punch to the gut. We'll figure it out, I assured her, though doubts gnawed at me. Let's focus on the letters. They mentioned a pattern of threats involving old lawyers from my firm. We need to track down those connections. Emily nodded, her determination shining through the fear. Okay, but where do we start? Let's go through the files I have on the case, I suggested. There might be a clue in there that could lead us to the origin of these letters. We spent the next few hours poring over the documents scattered across my desk. The dim light of the desk lamp flickered as I rifled through the papers, my heart pounding with urgency. I could feel Emily's presence beside me, her focus unwavering. Here, I exclaimed, pulling out a file that contained old witness statements from the original trial. These testimonies might tell us who was involved and who could potentially be behind the threats. Emily leaned closer, her breath warm against my neck. What do you see? I scanned the pages, noting the names and connections between the witnesses. Most of them were either clients or associates of my old firm. But there's one name here that stands out, Rachel Hastings. She was a key witness back then. I remember her testimony was rock solid. It helped convict Carl. Do you think she could have changed her mind? Emily asked, her brow furrowed in thought. What if someone pressured her to backtrack? It's possible, I replied, my mind racing. If she was threatened or manipulated, she might know something critical about the case and about the letters. Let's find her, Emily urged, her voice steady now. She might be able to help us. I agreed, and we began our search for Rachel Hastings. We discovered that she had moved to a small town not far from where we lived. The thought of confronting her filled me with a mix of anticipation and dread. What if she had indeed been coerced? What if she didn't want to talk to us at all? As we drove toward her new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows of doubt crept back in, whispering that we were treading on dangerous ground. Emily sensed my unease and placed her hand over mine. We'll be all right, Jason, she said softly. We're in this together. When we arrived at Rachel's modest house, I felt my heart race. The wooden porch creaked beneath our feet as we approached the front door. I knocked hesitantly, unsure of what we would find on the other side. After a moment, a woman in her early 50s opened the door. Her hair was a bit disheveled, and her eyes held a wary glimmer. Can I help you? She asked, her voice cautious. Ms. Hastings, I ventured, trying to keep my tone neutral. I'm Jason Moore, the attorney who represented Carl in the fraud case years ago. This is Emily, your girlfriend, she interrupted, her expression shifting slightly. What do you want? Can we talk? I asked, taking a step forward. It's about the case and some recent developments. We believe there might be something important that you could help us with. Rachel hesitated, glancing back into her home as if weighing her options. Finally, she nodded, stepping aside to let us in. Fine, but I don't want any trouble. As we settled into her living room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. I could see the apprehension in her eyes, and it mirrored my own anxiety. Thank you for agreeing to talk, I said earnestly. We know that you were a crucial witness in Carl's trial, and we're hoping you can shed some light on what happened back then. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I've moved on from all that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to get involved again. Please, Emily interjected gently. It's important. We've been receiving threats related to that case, and we think someone is trying to manipulate the truth. Rachel's eyes widened, and she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. What kind of threats? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Someone knows about the case, and they're using it to intimidate us. We believe it's connected to the trial. Any information you have could help us understand what's really going on. Rachel looked torn, glancing at the window as if expecting someone to appear. I can't talk about it here. Too many ears. Emily and I exchanged a glance, understanding the weight of her words. Where can we meet? I asked urgently. Meet me at the old diner on Main Street. It's closed now, but it used to be a hangout for the lawyers back then. I'll feel safer there. She gave us directions, and we left her house, the tension still thick in the air. As we drove to the diner, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being monitored. Every car that passed felt like a potential threat. Emily noticed my unease and squeezed my hand reassuringly. I know this is stressful, but we're on the right track, she said. When we arrived at the diner, the neon sign flickered dimly in the fading light. The place was deserted, the remnants of a bustling past lingering in the air. We took a seat in a booth near the back, our eyes scanning the entrance for any sign of Rachel. This place feels like a ghost town, I remarked, trying to lighten the mood. Emily chuckled softly. Maybe that's what we need, a ghost to help us out. Moments later, Rachel arrived, her expression still wary as she slid into the booth across from us. I hope no one followed me, she said, glancing around nervously. Did you see anyone? I asked, my heart racing. No, but this town has eyes everywhere. People love to gossip, she replied, her voice tense. What do you want to know? Everything, I replied. Why did you change your testimony back then? Did someone threaten you? Rachel hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't change it willingly. I was approached by someone after the trial. They made it clear that if I didn't comply, they'd ruin my life. I was scared. Who was it? Emily pressed, her voice steady. I don't know their name, Rachel admitted, her voice breaking, but they made it seem like they had connections. They knew things about me, about my family. Could it have been someone from my old firm? I asked, the pieces starting to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Possibly, she replied, her eyes darting around. They mentioned something about protecting their own. It was cryptic, but I got the impression that it was someone important. I leaned back, my mind racing. Is there anything specific you remember? A name, a detail, anything that could help us? Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes filled with regret. There was a mention of a game. They said it was all part of a bigger plan. I thought it was just talk, but now, I wonder if it meant something more. A game, Emily repeated, exchanging a glance with me. What kind of game? I don't know, Rachel said, her voice trembling, but it was clear they were playing with people's lives. I didn't want to be a pawn in their game, but I felt I had no choice. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. It felt as if the walls were closing in on us, and I could sense the danger lurking in the shadows. Rachel, we need to get to the bottom of this. If someone is orchestrating this manipulation, we need to expose them. She nodded slowly, her expression softening. I want to help. I didn't want to be a part of it then, and I don't want to be now. But I'm scared. Understandably so, I replied, my voice firm. But we can't let fear dictate our lives. The tension in the air was palpable as Emily and I made our way through the dimly lit warehouse where we had been led by a series of cryptic clues. Every step felt like it could be our last, but I was fueled by a mix of adrenaline and determination. I was done being a pawn in someone else's game. The truth was finally within reach, and the stakes had never been higher. Are you sure about this, Jason? Emily whispered, her voice laced with concern. I could see the worry etched across her face, and it tugged at my heart. She had already been through so much because of this case, and now we were walking into the lion's den together. I have to be, I replied, trying to project confidence I was struggling to feel. Lucas is behind this. I can feel it. If we can confront him, we might finally get answers and put an end to this madness. We stepped cautiously into the expansive room, the shadows casting eerie shapes on the walls. The faint sound of dripping water echoed in the silence, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. I could almost hear the pounding of my pulse in my ears as we moved deeper into the space. As we rounded a corner, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Lucas, standing there with a smirk that sent a chill down my spine. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Did you really think you could uncover the truth without consequences?" I took a step forward, my fists clenching at my sides. "What have you done, Lucas? We know you sent the letters. We know you're behind all of this." He chuckled, folding his arms across his chest. "Oh, Jason, you should know by now that the truth is rarely black and white. It's messy, complicated. Just like you." "What are you talking about?" Emily interjected, stepping beside me. "You think this is a game? People's lives are at stake here." Lucas's eyes gleamed with mischief, and he took a step closer. "That's exactly it, Emily. It's all a game, and I'm the one holding the cards. You two have been so eager to dig up the past, but you have no idea what you're getting yourselves into." I felt a surge of anger. "You're the one who's been manipulating everything. Carl was your partner, wasn't he? You knew about the fraud, and you let him take the fall." Lucas's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You really think you can pin this all on me? Carl was a loose end, and I did what I had to do to protect myself." "Protect yourself?" I spat. "By sending threats to us? By trying to frame me? You're a coward, Lucas. You've been hiding behind your so-called friends and your office facade for too long." He laughed, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice. "You think you're so noble, don't you? Always the hero, Jason. But heroes fall. And when you do, I'll be there to watch." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed behind us, causing both Lucas and me to turn. The sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, and I felt a knot in my stomach. "Jason!" Emily shouted, pulling me back as three men in dark clothing emerged from the shadows, surrounding us. "Looks like you've brought friends," Lucas said, an unsettling smile creeping across his face. "I didn't think you'd be so reckless." I glanced at Emily, her eyes wide with fear, but there was determination there too. "We can't let them take us," she whispered urgently. "Right." I agreed, my mind racing. "We need to find a way out of here." Just then, one of the men stepped forward, his expression cold. "You should have left this alone, Jason, but now you've crossed a line." "Who sent you?" I demanded, trying to buy time as I searched for an escape route. Lucas smirked again, clearly enjoying the chaos. "They're just here to ensure we finish this little game. The stakes are higher than you think." With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I grabbed Emily by the wrist and pulled her toward a narrow exit I spotted behind a stack of crates. "This way," I shouted. We bolted toward the exit, but the men quickly closed in. I felt a hand grab my shoulder, yanking me back. I stumbled, trying to shake them off, but it was no use. "Let him go," Emily cried, her voice rising in desperation. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, and suddenly, a burst of energy surged within me. I twisted out of the grip of the man holding me and swung my fist, connecting with his jaw. He staggered back, and I seized the moment, grabbing Emily's hand again. We dashed toward the exit, adrenaline fueling our escape. The men were close behind, shouting and cursing at us. As we reached the door, I could see the light spilling in from outside. "Almost there," I urged, kicking the door open and tumbling out into the night air. We sprinted across the parking lot, our hearts pounding, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. I turned back just in time to see one of the men burst through the door, shouting at the others. "Get them!" he yelled, his voice filled with rage. Emily and I dashed toward my car, fumbling with the keys as I desperately tried to unlock the door. My hands were shaking, but I finally got it open and we both jumped inside. "Go! Go!" Emily urged, her eyes wide with fear. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. I slammed the accelerator, and we shot out of the parking lot, leaving the warehouse behind us. As we drove, I could feel Emily's eyes on me. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We go to the police," I replied, determination settling in my chest. "We have to expose Lucas and everything he's done. He thinks he can intimidate us, but we won't back down." Emily nodded, her expression shifting from fear to resolve. "We can do this together, Jason. We won't let him win." I glanced at her, gratitude swelling in my heart. "Thank you for believing in me, Em. We'll get through this." As we sped down the road, I felt a newfound strength coursing through me. Lucas had underestimated us, and now we had the chance to turn the tide. I wouldn't let fear dictate my life any longer. We needed to confront him, to expose the truth, and to finally free ourselves from the chains of the past. It was time to take back control, and I was ready to fight. The night was far from over, but I could feel the momentum shifting in our favor. Together, we would unravel the web of lies and deceit that Lucas had spun, and we would emerge victorious. As we approached the police station, a sense of purpose filled me. I had been running for too long, but now it was time to stand and face the truth. I would not let my past define me, nor would I allow Lucas to dictate my future. We parked the car, and as we stepped out into the night, I took a deep breath. No matter what lay ahead, we were ready to confront the darkness and reclaim our lives. Together, we would shine a light on the secrets that had haunted us for far too long. With Emily by my side, I felt invincible.